Hello, Tech Pros, episode 130.
Always be authentic and always give first. I'm a big proponent of give before you even think about taking.
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week, we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity. Wednesday, leadership. Thursday, technology. Friday, people and communication. Saturday, entrepreneurship. And Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Jason Will. Happy Thursday, Jason.
Hi, how's it going? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing very well. You know, the weather's beautiful here in Northern California. It's not foggy, so that's a wonderful thing, and it's almost the weekend.
All right. Yeah, it's almost the weekend, and the weather is hot and humid here in Central Florida, like it always is, regardless of day or night or what time of the year. It's always hot and it's always humid, but that's why we love it.
Sounds good.
Over the past 10 years, Jason Will has successfully worked as a social media and technology consultant, freelance writer, speaker, and advisor. A few things became clear over the course of time. Building personal brands, teams, and companies are fueling elements of his passion. And as he puts it, content marketing is greater than social selling always. So Jason, what exactly do we mean by this when you say content marketing is greater than social selling? What's the difference between the two?
It's actually interesting, right? I mean, social media has been around for 12 years, more or less, you know, since the Facebook really took off in 2004. And, you know, it's funny is that a lot of people approach social media as a platform to sell people, right? It became kind of the new cold calling, right? And I think a lot of people need to have the mentality of give first. So give great nuggets of information, be a thought leader within a space, inspire people to do things versus telling them to do something. So oftentimes, you know, we get pitched on all sorts of different things on Twitter, on Facebook messages, on LinkedIn, all over the place. And it's like, you know, if you would have just sent me an article about the industry and maybe where it's going, and I would have said, wow, that's so nice of you that you sent me these free pieces of information. I want to learn more. You know, what else do you know about this industry? How else could we potentially help each other? So, you know, give before you take is really the key there. And, you know, social selling only really can happen if you have a relationship formed.
Yeah, I love the idea of creating a relationship. That's exactly why I started this podcast, is because I wanted to create an audience of people that connected with me and bonded with me on a personal level, right? It's of course sharing the ideas and the information of my guests, but it's also every episode has just a few minutes of my ideas and what I think is important and valuable. And some people are going to resonate with that. And then when I move on to different things, as I open up courses or premium products, they're going to be the folks that are passionate about my personal brand just because they like the free stuff that I've been putting out.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of collaboration in general, right? Is that you know, you put together people that have the exact same drive and motivation to help each other, and as long as that happens, then you know, magic can happen. So. You know, it's always nice to chat with people that are progressively trying to help others around them. And, you know, you're really only as strong as the community that you've built around yourself. So, you know, that's a big positive as you continue to expand that with great people.
Absolutely. And speaking of magic, you know, my mom kind of thinks that what I do here in technology is a lot like magic because she understands absolutely none of it. And it's okay, Mom. I still love you. You'll never understand, but that's great. No problem. We each have our strong suits. And Jason, as you know, today is Technology Thursday on Hello Tech Pros, and it's always about the past, the present, and future of technology here on the show. So you, as an entrepreneur, as a social media and technology consultant, you've probably seen a lot in the past and a lot today, and you probably have ideas on the future about how these businesses can really start like from the ground up and what technologies they should be using as they get their as they get their businesses started. So maybe you could tell us about the past. Maybe take us back, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years ago, wherever you want to start. But a time in the past where you want to really dive into the problems that businesses faced and business owners faced and the technology choices that they had to make.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, right? Because people say today it's very hard to acquire users, and the feedback that I always give them is that what are the steps that you've taken to build a community around you or build a loyal following that you're engaging with on a regular basis. And it's interesting because actually the cost of users has gone down over the course of time because the more offline activities that we used to have to do in the workplace have been replaced by progressively a lot of automated tools and online tools as well. So it's actually the easiest today to get in front of your potential customers, and realistically, it's 24 hours a day in every time zone around the globe. And that's the beauty of social media, right? And that's why if you know how to use it, it can be a very impactful tool for your business. So, if we think about the past, like I said, it's progressively become more online, but it also has become more global in nature a lot faster. So, the future is really an interesting place that we're moving into because, it becomes a little bit easier actually, as we move forward, because what ends up happening is that more and more free tools continue to pop up for you to reach your audience. And these free tools, the reason why they do that is because they just need adoption, and then ultimately they'll sell you on some, premium services. But the access to those tools is getting a lot easier. So, the people that say, hey, I don't have a product yet, or I haven't released my company yet, and I can't build an audience, it's never too early to start building an audience, and building an audience can be, giving great nuggets of information and, serving the people that are most interested in your topic.
So it's very interesting that, that we as business owners, we want to give great nuggets of information because we're trying to grow an audience. And we, sometimes we use free tools that pop up, as you said, all the time because they're free and they do a great job. And maybe at the beginning of our business, at the beginning of us trying to create our relationships with our audience, we don't need or want to spend a lot of money on tool sets. But at the same time, the tool companies that are building these tools are giving away their products for free, kind of like we're giving our content away for free because they're trying to build an audience of people who are using their tools.
Correct. And over the course of time, if you continue to keep coming back and that becomes more centralized to how you grow your community, you're going to probably end up paying for those services at some point in time because, there could be threshold limits on the product. You might want deeper analytics into it. You might want, additional ways to target specific groups of people, things like that as your business evolves. So, ultimately, if they build a great product, they get the free adoption. Over the longer term, as you continue to consume that tool within your business, the likelihood of you paying for it actually significantly increases.
So let's dive into some specifics. So can you give us some specific examples of either companies you've tried to start or people that you've tried to help in the past, maybe 10 years ago, where the proliferation of all these free tools wasn't as popular as it is today, and just the decisions and the type of work that people had to go through in order to build an audience if they were trying to do the social selling or just the old school marketing stuff that they would have to do.
Yeah, it's actually, I think the biggest one that resonates is not, the individual tools themselves. It's the fact that, we went from physical servers to cloud storage online. And, what's interesting is that I think, early on, everybody's like, oh, wow, I don't have to have all this physical space to power my product. Okay, great. That sounds good. But a lot of people overlooked a lot of these cloud-based infrastructure services because, for example, Amazon was one of the first ones to do what's called auto scaling. And auto scaling is where you hit thresholds within your servers and then it auto scales, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly what it says. And a lot of those services in the cloud actually don't do that. So you have to shut down your servers and stand up new ones. And it's actually very difficult to do because you can't anticipate that increase on the server usage. So, It's interesting because we it's never been cheaper to start a company today because of the access to all these tools. But then again, you really have to understand: is this a band-aid, or is this a longer term solution that you plan on still keeping? So, I think in anything in life, when you start a company, you have three constraints at all times, which is time, resources, and money. And you're never going to have all three of those working together. So you've got to pick two out of three and head down that path, knowing that the third one is probably going to creep up on you at some point in the future.
Yeah, and those three constraints will definitely shift over time, right? As you are a startup just trying to bootstrap it, do it on your own as much as possible, and all of a sudden you're approached by VCs and they're like, "Hey, we want to hand you buckets full of cash," and now you have all of a sudden you've got more money or more resources, but now you've got less time because they're expecting so much more out of you. So I think that's very interesting how that dynamic can shift. And I love what you said about in the past we had the physical storage, the physical computing versus now, everything's in the cloud. And I can definitely relate to that because I've worked with big Fortune 100 organizations that had their own data centers and, thousands of servers and just, millions of pieces of code and applications run on them, to small business owners that had servers like in the closet, like literally on-premise servers in the closet just to run a small network of 10 to 12 people, and it's like, nowadays, is that stuff even necessary? Like, do corporations need to have their own data centers, and do small businesses need to have their own servers to get the job done?
It just depends. I mean, once you become like a Facebook, I think it's inevitable that you have to have physical space. At some point in time, there's definitely a need for that, but the cost benefit, especially early on, and our friends at SoftLayer were acquired actually by IBM, and they do a fantastic job at giving away these free services for the first year to a lot of smaller companies. Being here in the Bay Area, it seems like everybody's trying to be a tech entrepreneur, but the interesting part about that is those guys over there. They'll give you up to, I think it's about 120 or 150,000 in storage for the first year. And I mean, your company has to be pretty sizable to need that much storage, but the access to it is great. And it's some of these things that alleviate some of the early pressures because you brought up the topic of investors. They're expecting entrepreneurs to go further down the product life cycle and also show traction a lot more than they ever have in the past. So, having not only the right, tools in place, but having the right team in place and ultimately being able to execute, you've got to make a lot of these decisions early on, and it shows the strength of the entrepreneur and the team if they can figure out those tools and exercise them appropriately.
So what's a great process or just first steps that a company should do, especially for people that don't come from a tech background? Because, a lot of folks that come from a tech background, they have kind of their go-to language. They have their go-to tool set that they like and they're used to, and they just want to get up to speed as quickly as possible. But for companies, startups that don't come from a tech background, right? Maybe they come from hospitality or just whatever else, something completely different other than tech. What are some easy choices or the things that they should be thinking about as they're making choices to get their product or service online?
So the first thing I always tell people like this is don't let your eagerness get too far ahead of you. Learn a little bit of patience early on. I mean, if this is not your core strength, technology, I mean, I was fortunate enough to be in technology consulting for several years and learn a lot of things and pretty much did every job imaginable outside of writing physical code more than a week. I give a lot of credit to people that write code. My ADD is way too high to be writing code. But to go back to what you were saying is that what I always tell people is that early on you have to understand your product and what it actually does. So if you don't come from this industry, that's perfectly fine. But you've got to be willing to do the not so glamorous work. So some things that I did early on was I actually studied job descriptions. So I went to companies similar to what we were building, and I would look at their career page, and I'm like, oh, they're hiring an iOS developer. Great. Okay, what are they asking for skill set? What are the languages that somebody needs to know to obtain a job at a competitor? Okay, great. So now I started digging into those technologies and figuring out what they do and how they play together, right? How are they different? Is it front end technology versus back end? What are the different outside integrations we have to use? Whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, authentication. All this kind of stuff. You just have to start laying out all the things that you think you need, and then it's like playing. Kind of connect the dots, right? How do pieces connect to each other? And you create a puzzle, and that puzzle becomes your infrastructure diagram or your data mapping structure. And not that you have to know how to physically stitch those things together. That's not the point. The point is that if you're going to start a company and technology is not your background, you at least have to know the right questions to ask, so that if you do find somebody who is the right person to join you on that adventure, then at least you can qualify them pretty quickly. So, the not so glamorous things like studying AngelList and reading a lot of job descriptions took up a lot of my time in the early days, just to, really make sure that I knew when somebody hit me right in the face that was the best candidate that I was probably going to get my hands on, how do I quickly qualify them and close the deal?
I love that you weren't trying to study iOS Objective-C Swift code in order to actually be very, very proficient at outputting that code, right? What you were studying was the overall concepts of what that technology did and how it integrated with other things, and where in different technology stacks does that technology fit. And that way, when you needed to identify someone who had that skill set, you knew what you were looking for. Or when someone walked up and had that skill set, you were like, now I can relate to you, and I can kind of plug you as a piece of the puzzle into this overall organization or overall data mapping or infrastructure diagram of how the processes around my company works.
Absolutely. And I've built teams before this, right? So, you get a gut instinct when you meet the right candidate, which typically comes down to the way that they problem solve and the way that they have a perspective on how they take a problem and ultimately turn it into a solution, right? And I think that's just the nature of a good teammate. But what I'm getting at here is that I interviewed about 80 developers before I selected 2 on our current venture. And I'm sure some of those early interviews that I had, the people were probably like, what is going on with this kid? Like, why is he asking me that? But there's specific reasons why I asked a lot of the questions. It's because, there's a lot of thought that goes into these job descriptions for companies that are, 50, 100, 200, $300 million in revenues. And by me asking those same types of questions, I'm really trying to gain insight into what type of person this could ultimately be for our team. And like you said, everybody has to play a specific role, and then how do you roll those pieces together to make a oiled machine or a high functioning team? And ultimately you have to have the vision to be able to put those pieces together, because execution is everything.
So what were some of the questions that you would ask candidates that kind of either threw them for the loop or was outside of kind of the quote-unquote normal interview questions that people ask?
Well, for us, because we're really focused on restaurants, bars, cafes, and we want to attract people on the team that are avid foodies or like to go out and enjoy a craft cocktail. We like sociable people on our team. So a lot of the things that I would ask are like, when you wake up in the morning, what's your number one motivation? I want to know what makes somebody tick on a regular basis, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the guys that we hired, he goes, I just want to solve very difficult problems all day long. I was like, okay, well, tell me more about this, right? And it's fascinating because he actually turned out to be the youngest person that I interviewed, but he asked the most intelligent questions out of anybody that I interviewed. And it was interesting because he was asking questions about the product that I've thought about in my head, but nobody had ever asked me before the detailed questions that he was asking. And I think ultimately when you hire a developer is not just somebody who writes lines of code. A developer needs to be able to put themselves in the position of the user, right? And the user experience and how that product actually looks and feels when somebody has it in their hand. So I think that the closer a developer can be to the usability or the receiving end of the fruits of their labor, the better that they can start to question the product and optimize it a lot faster, right? Because I think in a lot of organizations, especially early on, you have very segmented roles. Okay, the designer creates the product, the designer passes it to the developer, the developer passes it to somebody who tests it, they release it, right? Well, if you don't have people thinking about each other's roles and impact and potentially questioning those things, how to do it better, you create a lot of problems within products. And there's not a level of continuity that users expect today. And ultimately, it leads to a lot of products going under.
Well, coming from a software development background and being in these positions, developers and just technical people in general, right? A lot of them get into the role because they love solving problems, but many of them don't get in the role because they like interacting with people and having conversations and being social, right? And so it's kind of funny that you're specifically looking for social people, not because it's probably in two pieces, and I'll let you speak to this, right? So probably one is just because they're easier to communicate with. The more soft skills, the more communication skills you have, the better it is to interact on the team. But specifically for your company is because you're working with like travel bloggers and chefs and mixologists, and your business is about foodies and it's about drinks and it's about, enjoying this stuff. And you're really, really looking for the culture of the organization and the culture of the individuals and making sure that there's a good fit on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that there's a lot of motivation behind, why I decided to ultimately jump in and be an entrepreneur. But single-handedly, the number one thing that's a driver on a daily basis is the culture of the team. And, it's fascinating because, not to make any specific references, but if you follow what happened in San Francisco with a particular company where they actually had to recently oust the CEO, it ultimately became a product of those early hires. And, when you make early hires, and I think this is the thing that is kind of the golden rule for anybody that wants to start a company is that you need to take those first 4, 5, 6 hires extremely seriously, because that's what sets the tone for your 7th, 8th, 50th, 100th, the person that comes in afterwards. They actually are the representation of the company, and for better or for worse, that's the perspective that everybody has of your company, are based on the individuals that make it up, especially early on. So you want those people to have the right mindset. You want those people to be a good representation of the company as a whole. And for us, that's number one. Regardless of skill set, it's impossible to get to future conversations unless there's a correct cultural fit. And for us, we have an extremely diverse team from all walks of life, all different types of backgrounds, and I wouldn't have it any different than that, because that's representative of the world. And if you're going to build a product, you want your team to be able to represent the people that are potentially going to use it in all facets. And there's a lot of variables that go into the differences around the world.
So, Jason, we've talked a lot about the past and the present of being an entrepreneur and how you form teams and how you select technologies. In just a moment, I want to ask you about the future, both the future in general of entrepreneurship and technology, and specifically your future and the businesses that you're working on. But first, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by Minio Cloud Storage. Minio is a cloud object storage server for developers and DevOps written in Go. The Go programming language is the emerging language of choice for modern cloud infrastructure projects, and it allows Minio to be highly concurrent and lightweight. Minio is Amazon S3 compatible, built with microstorage architecture in mind, but at its heart, Minio is simple, scalable, and supported by a passionate developer and user community. In episode 89 of Hello Tech Pros, I talked with A.B. Periasamy, one of the founders of Minio, about the importance of community support and recruiting software developers who are as passionate about their product's code as artists are of their art. Check out that episode at hellotechpros.com/89 and check out Minio Cloud Storage at minio.io. That's minio.io. Okay, we're back with Jason Will. We've been talking to Jason, who comes from a social media technology consultancy background, as well as writing, speaking, advising companies on technology and on business. We've been talking to Jason about, the things that businesses had to do in the past, like select technologies and determine what type of people to hire based off of what was available in the marketplace before, and now the options that are available today with cloud storage and off-prem solutions and free, so many free tools out there on the marketplace that you can dabble with. Just amazing opportunities, and it just makes it as easy as ever for companies to get started. So, Jason, what are you looking forward to the most on the future? Like, what's the big thing that's on your radar?
So the thing that I actually saw happening about 18 months ago that I started preparing for then was this whole idea of content marketing, specifically within that vertical, influencer marketing. And, at that time, influencers were really, A-list celebrities, right? You saw them on TV or in the movies or whatnot. But there was this gap in between where you had these amazing industry experts that were not on the Food Network, were not on the Travel Channel, but they were still doing amazing things, and their quality of content and their engagement with a real audience was impressive, and still is impressive today. But what I saw with this when I started really studying social media was, these are the folks that are going to be the replacement for me reading, the travel section in a newspaper, because I want to follow my favorite influencers because they're going on these unbelievably ridiculous adventures. I mean, we have friends that were down at Richard Branson's island, a couple of times, and
wow,
you get to vicariously live through these people's travels, right? And the food that they're eating and the people that they're meeting and just overall the experiences, right? Because ultimately, a lot of people don't remember the actual dish itself. I mean, yeah, they took a picture and they posted it, but what they remember is that the experience and how they felt in that moment when they had that food with those people in that actual location. And it kind of pulled on my heartstrings a little bit, because it seemed that these influencers are kind of the modern day starving artist. And, I wanted to provide a centralized platform for them, to put recommendations for the best places to eat and drink around the world, and help them monetize in multiple different ways and engage an audience that really cared to hear what they have to say. So, there's definitely a lot of personal reasons why we're on this mission, and ultimately we get to work with incredible people in the hospitality space.
So tell us about the product that you've put together to help these folks get their word out.
Sure. So we saw this interesting opportunity a little ways back where you had these influencers. So think, chefs, food and travel bloggers, sommeliers, mixologists, folks like that they were putting recommendations online. And when I say online, it meant that it was going into their Twitter feed, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, you name it. The disconnect is that none of those recommendations were making their way to actual travel review sites, because there's a big disparity between the level of authenticity and the level of expertise of these influencers versus the people that historically have put a lot of recommendations on those other tools. So we saw this opportunity to say, okay, if we can validate very high level experts within the industry, we vet them, qualify their content, and we give them a centralized place for them to put recommendations and live. Now, instead of people having to go to Twitter and catch something in real time and try to plan their trip off of screenshots and messages and all this like crazy way that we try to plan our trips according to influencer recommendations, you centralize them into an app. And so we built Zipkick as basically the centralized place for you to discover the best restaurants, bars, and cafes in the world by industry experts that we vet. And we really go to great lengths to qualify them as industry experts. So, it's the most simple way to discover those new places and trust the information behind it.
Yeah, I think I've always found interesting about just kind of media in general, when you think of newspapers, radio, television, old school media, is the people that are writing the articles and posting, the videos and on television. Those have a direct connection to the media companies that are sponsoring it, right, or that are putting it out. They are hired by those companies to do it. Whereas you are pulling together like this collection of industry experts, subject matter experts that come from a diverse background of like all over the world, who that just are doing good stuff, right? They're doing good work, and we're just allowing them to have a common place to post where now they are the followed person. Their articles, their tips are getting hits and getting likes, as opposed to just the person that's hired by the company that has the big marketing budget.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it's I chuckle about this, but it's real. Is that 5 years ago, actually, TripAdvisor went through a lawsuit. Their tagline used to be "Reviews people can trust." That used to be the tagline as of 2011. And they lost a lawsuit because of a lot of their reviews were in question about the authenticity. So they were forced to change their tagline to "Reviews from our community."
Wow.
And now you fast forward to today, and estimates say between 20 and 50% of all online travel reviews are actually fake.
God,
And
that just feels so dirty. We use those all the time to plan our vacations, to decide where we're going to spend our money and where we're going to travel, and just to realize, gosh, 50% of them are fake. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that think about this though, right? I mean, really, really think about why it's evolved into what it's evolved in. I mean, the intention of these travel review sites at the beginning, when they first started, was never to end up to what it is today, right? You can't always decide what your future is going to be, right? So it's really fascinating to learn the psyche behind this, because think about this: if I own a cafe, and across the street, this guy or this gal also owns a cafe, and they're absolutely crushing my business. Mm-hmm. There's nothing stopping me today on review sites from creating a email and saying, "Oh man, there were cockroaches that just ran across the floor at ABC Cafe." There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing stopping anybody from doing that.
Yeah.
So guess what? Are you going to pay $100, $200, $500 as a business to try to market yourself more effectively, or are you going to take 5 minutes and create an email, write a bad review for the guy across the street, and ultimately try to impact their business that way, right? I don't think ethically that's the best thing to do, or nor would I, partake in something like that ever. But for them, maybe there's justified rationale. But paying people to write fake reviews has now become commonplace in a lot of different review sites online. It's not just within travel. Our goal is to say we are personally doing all the vetting up front. And, I've been asked multiple times, well, how are you going to maintain the quality at scale? Well, how are you not going to become, the next, you fill in the blank, right? Whatever your travel review site is that you use. This is the thing that makes it so unique and so different, is that these influencers have a personal brand that is their livelihood. Okay, so think about that for a second. If you are working with the biggest brands around the world and your personal brand is the number one reason that you get business, if you start putting biased or untruthful things online around your personal brand and that gets lost, or you lose credibility, you've literally lost your entire livelihood on what allows you to live. That's a lot of risk. Meaning, you're not going to put a fake review on Zipkick because it's too much risk to your personal brand and ultimately your livelihood.
Right. Yeah. So kind of tie it together here. We've got on any other site, most sites, you can have anybody in the community, right? And by anybody, I mean anybody, meaning bots, meaning fake accounts, meaning anybody can get on these sites and leave a review. And that review may absolutely mean nothing, right? Like in my world, in podcasting, anybody can go to iTunes And there are services out there that evil people can use, and you can pay them 5, 10, 50 bucks, $100, whatever it is, and have people across the world who've never listened to your show leave reviews. Or you can have worse, have bots automatically script, create fake accounts, leave a review, and that account just kind of dies and does nothing. And that stuff is just evil. I mean, there's nothing good about it. As opposed to what you guys are doing is like, you're only taking the reviews from people that you have vetted and you know, like, are real people who have been in the business, who know what they're talking about, whose livelihoods are at stake, and they're not going to post something positive or negative about somebody just to put it out there. They're going to put their honest opinions because those are the opinions people trust.
Right. And you know, the interesting thing about this is we often get asked this, which is, well, how are you going to get 100,000 of these people, 200,000 of these people, whatever, right? Well, believe it or not, a lot of these bloggers, they see each other 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year at conferences or different Twitter chats or, you know, all sorts of different things. It's actually a very close-knit community. And it's this way with chefs. It's this way with sommeliers. I mean, one of our advisors is one of 254 master sommeliers in the world. He's often judging all the wine competitions around the world. I mean, his ability to access anybody in the wine industry is unparalleled. So, you know, it's not a matter of finding these people. That has nothing to do with the fact of our ability to succeed in this area. It's 100% to do with, are the right people getting involved? And, you know, how do we continue to get the right people involved that people can ultimately trust? Because when you spend hundreds or thousands or even, you know, $20 on a meal, it doesn't make a difference. You should have an amazing experience and know that you're going to a place that you should feel comfortable and confident that you're going to have exactly what it is that you're expecting.
Good stuff. Great stuff, Jason. Thanks so much for sharing. If you could wrap it up for us, we've talked about a lot of things from starting a business to picking the right tech to why fake reviews suck and why we should have honest reviews from real people. But if you could sum it all up for us and provide your final words of wisdom for the audience, and then the best way that we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Sounds good. So, you know, a couple of themes that probably came up throughout this, which was, you know, the content marketing over social selling. Always be authentic and always give first. I'm a big proponent of give before you even think about taking. You know, the second piece about that is really that idea around time, resources, and money. You know, don't beat yourself up about not being able to do all three of those simultaneously. In the early stages of a company, you've got to make quick decisions. You got to take this thing to market, and you've got to iterate, which means that you've got to get customer feedback coming in ASAP, whether that's good or horrible, whatever the feedback is, that's good feedback. It's kind of, you know, along those lines of all press is good press. And, you know, really, as far as getting a hold of me or the company, we're very, very active on social media. My handle's at Jason, the letter B, Will, WILL. And our company's at Zipkick, ZIPKICK, and we're very active. If you reach out to us, we respond typically within 24 hours, no problem, sometimes within just a few minutes. But another thing that I want to, you know, put out there just to everybody is that we are actively talking to new influencers. And if you are a food blogger, travel blogger, chef, sommelier, mixologist, somebody within that realm, that can make these expert recommendations, email us. The email is community@zipkick.com. We're monitoring that very actively, and we're going to be growing this thing pretty rapidly here. So, you know, thank you so much for the time, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to tell the story.
Jason, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value your stories and your wisdom, your insight across all these different topics that we've been discussing today. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Tech Pros, if you didn't catch all those links, you can get them at hellotechpros.com/130. This is episode 130. So again, that's hellotechpros.com/130. And, you know, whether you're in a startup or whether you have an existing business, there's there's these three things that we talked about that's always going to be in contention, right? And so you're just going to have to balance. Are you spending more time? Are you spending more money? Are you spending more resources? And as your business fluctuates, so will the decisions that you have to make. So just hang in there and really find the right people. I think that's a big one that far too many people gloss over, is really identifying the culture of the organization that you're trying to build. And it's never too late to really establish what is that culture, right? Is your company all about foodies? Then hire foodies to work on the tech, because they will understand it, they will get it, and you will not have to do as many like user surveys and stuff like that, because everybody in your company like knows the same stuff, likes the same stuff, is involved, like participates. You've been listening to Jason Will, and I'm Chad Bostic, and until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/130. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Technology Thursday, but tomorrow my featured guest and I discuss people and communication. On Saturday, we talk entrepreneurship, Sunday, being unplugged, Monday, motivation, Tuesday, productivity, Wednesday, leadership, and back again on Thursday to discuss technology once again. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.